to literally reach massive amount of people and add this massive amount of value to them through each episode step by step. My first goal is to just be able to reach this massive amount of people, like millions of people, for example.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, what's up, podcaster? It is Adam A. Adams, your host. And today we are joined with a friend of mine, somebody who's in real estate. So I do real estate investing on the side. Some of you know that. But somebody in that same field and with a lot of mutual connections became a friend a few years ago. She has a podcast. She's launching this podcast, or maybe it's relaunching. I'll ask her if it's relaunching a podcast, but it's called Think Outside the Stocks, which think outside the box, but she's really saying is that there's other ways to invest. And I'm stoked to have her. Will you introduce yourself and just let us know what you're working on? And then we're going to get into this part of today's episode where we find out everything that you're doing to launch this podcast, because as we record it, it launches in a couple days. And for the listener, it's already going to be launched before they hear this. And so once they do hear this, they can just go straight to the link and find your podcast. So tell us a little bit about you, and then we will jump in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Adam. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. It's a delight to be here. Like you said, that we have so many mutual connections and we have met personally, and you are just such a gem of a person. There's a lot that we have in common in terms of values. So I really like connecting with you back again, and I'm excited to do this. So little about me. I'm a first generation immigrant. Actually, I came 9,000 miles away from my roots 20 some years ago and kind of restarted my life here in this country. And I struggled through visa issues, getting the job, transferring, stuff like that. And I actually started working in an IT industry in one of the top 5 consulting companies. So that felt like a dream that, okay, now I have that, the top 5 consulting job. We have kids, we bought our home, and it felt like American dream, right? But, certain turning points happen along the way. First being the 2008, we actually lost our primary home. Had a change in job situation, moved from California to Austin. But really the twist and turn happened for me in 2015. That's where I had to pull the plug of this high earning 6-figure, comfort level job because of my health. My health was deteriorating so much, and not because of the job, just internally, whatever going on with me. But the job didn't help, right? Having 50, 60 hours work week didn't help. So I started my real estate journey in reverse engineering way. And I'm so grateful for that, because of that change, I challenged my inertia and actually started in this world of real estate, the syndication, and also found the infinity banking strategy. So these are the 2 strategies. I kind of made that 80-20 impact, right? It's like 20% of application and 80% impact to my financial structure. But interestingly, what happened after doing that also, I kind of got restless. I was not happy about it. And I kept questioning what's happening. So it goes back to the community that I come from, right? As a community, we don't talk about finances, we don't talk about salaries, and it's okay to not talk about that numbers, but it's right and it's good to talk about your successes, especially our failures, because we all learn from each other, right? So I saw that the community that I come from, the first generation immigrants, the tech industry that I come from, they are working so hard and they're tied to their W-2 jobs with that time and money proportion. And that made me restless. And that's actually why I started Think Outside the Stocks. And if you actually ask me, the Think Outside the Stocks podcast, this is my first time actually launching it. It's not a relaunch. So it's the first time. It's absolutely out of my comfort zone. And the reason behind it, it's 2 reasons, right? First of all, I grew up in the household where, men were supposed to take care of the financial structure and women were taking care of the household and daily stuff, right? Kids and family stuff like that. So as a girl child, I didn't even get exposed to finances or banks or, maybe I was 18 years old. I didn't even know how to transact in a bank per se. But my parents focused on my education. I have masters in computer management. So I came all the way here because of what they did. But English was not my first language. I didn't even once it's the curriculum started in the 8th grade, my subjects, science and math, went to full English. So at that point, it's really now I have to really understand this language. And I was able to read and speak a little bit, but I was not able to have a conversation like this till almost I was like 2022. And when I started my jobs and we went to UK first and we came here. And that's where when the conversation practice and it made me comfortable and I can now have a conversation comfortably, right? So for me to jump into the podcast world and kind of starting just about having these conversations with people, with the industry experts, and to have my community learn from it, it's completely out of my comfort zone. But I'm a Go Giver, Go Giver by Bob Burg. That's my Bible that I go by. And I don't ask myself that, do I want to be that perfect in a conversation or perfect in whatever I'm doing? But I want to be perfect in providing that education. So it's about adding that massive amount of value to massive amount of people. And I don't want to question myself that, am I there yet? Right? Because every day that I ask that question to myself, I'm doing a disservice to at least one person. So that's the thought behind Think Outside the Stocks podcast. And I am jumping into it just head on.
That's nice. And let's talk about how you are launching it. So what kind of team did you get in your place? What are they going to do for you? What sounds important? What are you worried about? And then if I can coach or support, then I'll let you know after as well. So who are you hiring? How is it working out? What are they doing for you is kind of the main question.
Sure. So I have a team in place and, great coach. We have a great communication. We are working on the launching sequence for my episodes. So the way we have decided that we will start with some solo episodes, some guest episodes to start with the kind of a combination in the beginning. And I want to create this short course about syndication. So the few episodes combined with like some guest episodes, those episodes, like, for example, like 2, 3, 5 or something else, that will create a short course. And that will be their, step-by-step process to go into the syndication world. So far, I have, my tools, my equipments I'm using. If you want me to go into details, I can tell you that. I have the Samsung, microphone, some good camera, lighting. We are using Riverside for recording. We are set with that so far.
I want you to go into more detail on syndication. Don't give us the whole short course, but just in case the listener is like, what is she saying? What is that word? Syndication. Share what that means. And I also have a couple of other questions, if you can just table that one for a second, which is, you mentioned infinite banking. Bank on yourself.
I call it infinity banking, by the way. There's different people call different things, but infinity is
Okay.
So
what I want to know is, you mentioned that it was important to you, but then you said that the podcast is more about syndication. So I was wondering if it was about both. So
yes,
I'm going to have two questions. I'm just going to finish asking this question. I'll say, so again, two things: what's syndication and what is infinite banking? Are you ready?
The infinity banking.
I've always called it infinite banking because that's how it's spelled.
I know. Yeah.
So I'm just going to say it that way because I've never heard it the other way. So to wrap it up, two main questions: what is syndication? And also, what's infinite banking?
Yeah, sure. The syndication, right? First of all, syndication is a way that the investors can invest passively as a group investment in commercial real estate investments. So these are multi-million-dollar worth investment. And when you're passing through the city, you will see the apartment complexes, you will see the storages. That's when actually investors like you can invest with the tiny portion that you have as a group investment. And there are two parts to it. There's an active person, there's an active partner, and there is a passive partner. The active partner is that subject matter expert who takes care of everything as part of that investment. And as a passive investor, you can actually come in and you can participate, just, review and invest and get that systematic cash flow and the equity at the end as a growth. So that's the syndication. And the infinity banking, the way it works is that, now I do want to step back and talk about this passive investing, right? When people come to me, think about just this passive investment, this creating the systematic cash flow for them. But I look at it from a different perspective. I look at it from a more holistic perspective. I talk about making your savings efficient first. Infinity banking system is actually creating your own banking structure. So your money, when it's either it's emergency money, either it's parked money for your investment, it's working really hard for you. And the magic that works on the infinity banking system is about compounding. Compounding is the eighth wonder of the world, as Einstein said that. And this is making your savings efficient, first of all. So holistically, that's what we will be talking about in Think Outside the Stocks podcast, that making your savings efficient, creating passive income, and as a whole, putting that structure around it, that solid vault about tax planning, legal structure, looking at even protecting and passing it to the next generation. So creating the estate planning, the life insurance planning, stuff like that. So the podcast is about that holistic look to all your financial structure.
I want to go in a little bit more detail on you launching this podcast. What are you thinking about? What's making it valuable to you? How is the company supporting you? Anything that we missed out on, and kind of like the episode structure and why you chose to do it that way, and if they're going to help you after. So a 70-part question, I know. Let's really dive into what are they helping you with?
Definitely. So being the first time podcaster, I was totally confused about where to even begin, right? So we talked about the strategy that how are we going to structure our episodes? How do we want to plan out what topics I want to bring in, what guests, per se, at least for the first few episodes, I want to bring in, and what is the structure of that episode itself, right? So when we are talking about the guest, about their story, so I created a structure. When I was talking to the coach, we talked about what kind of people that we want to reach as well, right? So what is that the listener that who will be interested in it? So making sure that they are reached with this podcast, right? So we talked about that. We talked about structure. We talked about what kind of guests we will be coming in. So that's the front end. And at the back end, right?
Let's not just say structure, but let's say how it's structured. Like, why is it structured that way? Why is it important? So that the listener has like a takeaway also. Instead of their takeaway being, okay, I need to figure out how to structure it. Let's get some ideas about how are you structuring it and why, so that our thought process as we're starting a podcast can be supported as well.
Sure. So we think outside the stocks, that is going to be that stick outside the box kind of a view, right? So I didn't want in my podcast to just sound like any other podcast, because there are just so many podcasts out there, right? So the way I structured it is that, yes, there'll be that story, that inspiration, how did they do it? These are the industry experts that we are talking about. So these are the people who are successful in their words. And we all know, right? Success leaves clues. That's what I segmented the second portion of it, the structure of it, is that how do they think outside the stocks? Because we want our passive investors to learn from them, right? It's not just about their core subject matter as an asset class or an investment type, but it's about how are they doing it? How are they putting this holistic perspective to their financials? How are they passively investing it, creating that streams of income? How are they guarding it, protecting it, and thinking of passing it to next generation? How are they measuring it? Because what gets measured gets managed, right? So how are they measuring it? That's another challenge that investors face. And then in the next kind of a structure, we talk about how they can reach, because sometimes listeners do want to reach and do want to learn more from them. And then the last is kind of a fun round, which is, I call it rapid fire round, where I ask kind of 30 to 60-second answer questions, something fun, something they learned, some book or something that they can share with the listeners, where the listeners can take that tidbit and kind of expand on that.
So who do you interview exactly? And how does that support the person that you want to work with?
What I want to bring in with Think Outside the Stocks is different asset classes, right? So I'm looking at interviewing the expertise in these asset classes. For example, self-storage. So Scott Meyers is, who I'm going to actually talk in a few minutes. So he's that expert. He actually started this whole self-storage education in this country, right? So these are the kind of people in multifamily, in self-storage, in industrial. I'm talking to some experts, economic experts, talking about market cycles, because there is a lot of fear in investors like that. So I created these segments. Again, the type of episodes is another differentiation, that we will talk about one asset class at a time. We will kind of go to the little bit details from the passive investor's perspective, what due diligence that they can do, what they can look for in these investments when they want to decide and confidently invest in it. So just like a surface level, actually. And then we talk about some segments which will focus on the market. the conditions. What are the asset classes to invest in these particular conditions? We kind of have that trifecta right now, Adam, right? That we have the inflation, recession, and growing interest rates. So these kind of topics with changing the market cycles, that's very important as well. And lastly, I do want actually the passive investors to take the center stage as well. Because what's going to happen is that they're going to listen to all these guests, and typically that's what happens. But they never get that center of attention. They never get to talk about their problems, what they face, and what are they looking for. So I am actually in my passive investor segment will bring the passive investors, will talk to them, and just try to kind of tweak and pivot our structure of the future episodes so we can address these concerns that they have.
I like it. That's cool. So the different asset classes. Why are you doing different asset classes on your podcast? Tell me, like, how does that benefit your own company?
So think outside the stocks is not just about one particular asset class. When I asked them that think outside the stocks, diversify outside of the stocks, I started with multifamily. Multifamily is the core subject matter expert. And I have, expertise in that, but I cannot just say that outside the stocks and multifamily, outside the stocks and multifamily. So as a vision, that's another thing that I wanted to bring in is that diversification in commercial real estate. And average investors, when I have talked to multiple investors about it, they are interested in even going out of that multifamily, right? So self-storage, for example, mobile home parks, for example, but they don't know how to get started. There is so much education available, maybe some podcasts available, focusing on multifamily, but that's the reason I bought in the different asset classes. And also with the traffic target that we are facing right now, there is so much of investment fear in the market right now. The investors are waiting with their money on the sidelines, and this money is actually eroding to inflation. And it's so hard for me to see that. So understanding their fear, their needs, their changing needs, some of them, they have maybe lost their jobs. The cash flow is important. So to be able to provide those kind of asset classes and provide that education for them is really important. So these are the two primary reasons why, I wanted to do that focus. And again, always that outside the box thinker. So I don't want them to just think about passive income in isolation, but give about that more holistic picture. And the diversification is the key to everything.
So how many different asset classes do you invest in when you're raising capital?
Yeah. So I actually am looking at it one asset class at a time. I come from a tech background, right? I'm a coder by heart. So in a coding language, if you learn one coding language, you just have to learn semantics of the other thing. The logic behind it stays the same, pretty much same. You have that enormous appetite of doing that. So I'm going to use that in analogy in the syndication world, right? The multifamily is that core subject matter expert. So I can take one asset class at a time, learn about it, make sure that I can do that due diligence. I can provide that information, that education to investors. So one asset class at a time, right? So in terms of investments, I have started actually a customized diversified fund where I have gotten ATM investments. These are your, the automated teller machines, the cash machines that you see. So that cash flow actually creates a tremendous amount of cash in investors. So the way I'm looking at in terms of diversification, right, that I have say, for example, industrial as a new build, it doesn't provide you any cash flow, but great equity at the end. You have then another portion is multifamily or self-storage, which will provide you consistent cash flow and kind of an equity at the end too. And then there is ATM kind of an investment, which provides you tremendous cash on cash, but there is no equity at the end or no principal coming back at the end because it's like a laptop, right? It's just gonna, over the time, 7 years, it's just gonna go away. So in my investment strategy with multifamily, I have added the ATM strategy. I have, brought in some investors, and they actually were quite happy in this recessionary environment that they actually are getting mid-20s cash on cash. So that's worked really great for them. I'm also looking at industrial because if we are looking at that deglobalization phenomenon that's happening, and currently the warehouse and industrial is kind of blowing. It's just going through the roof. So that's what my analysis is next. And I'm looking at that as one asset class at a time, the triple net kind of the structure that they have. And that will be the next one coming into my diversified fund.
Okay. So it sounds like you are interviewing a lot of different asset classes. And part of it is because you are looking for being connected with people that are doing those other things and also looking to learn so that you can kind of get into those asset classes as well. Is that correct?
The education is really, really important. Not all the asset classes that I'm bringing in the podcast, that's going to be, it's a part of the diversified fund. Very selective will be the part of it. But the intention is to provide them that variety of non-biased education, really, to provide them that, okay, these are the things that exist. I could be talking about in future about investing in art, but that does not mean that I'm going to bring that. And that's why I want to kind of keep that separation, that it's a non-biased education. It's a non-biased education about different asset classes. And those who I identify as going to be more recession resistant, historical especially, that's one asset class at a time I will bring in as an investment in my diversified fund.
Yeah, cool. And then after the podcast is up and running, after they pour into you and you launch it, what's going to happen with who does all the editing, post-production, writing show notes, publishing, emailing your guests, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So the first question I asked myself when I started thinking about podcasts is who, not how, right? I wanted to be providing that education, but I didn't want it to do all this stuff behind the scene, right? So the company that I have hired, they actually are going to take care of everything post-production. So they will actually take the editing in terms of the guest and my recording, the interviews that we have recorded or the solo episodes that I have recorded. They will create the social media kind of snippets out of it so we can promote on social media. They will also take it and put it on the website where it will be like a page per episode where there is that audio available, there is the video available. So we are also launching it as a video podcast. And some of these episodes where I will first start creating the short courses. So the first course, the syndications course I talked about, right? So that will also go in the membership area where I can build based on the basics first, the very nitty-gritty details of the basics, and then the advanced concept of it, of that due diligence at one asset class at a time, and build that course first for syndication, then for the banking concept. And as I'm putting in those asset classes in the investment to provide that membership of the different asset classes. So that's the plan.
Awesome. I've got a couple of questions that are queued up, and we'll do it right after a quick break. But I wanted to mention to the listener and also to my team who does all the editing and everything to make sure that we get Who Not How, the book, like Amazon link as well as Audible link in the show notes so that the listener can scroll down and connect with that as well. Let's take a quick break. And I want to find out when we get back a couple of things. A, how much is it going to cost you to work with this team? B, we'll talk about a membership area and if we should be doing the same. And third, we'll see if there's anything that I can do to support what you have going on as well. So we'll be right back. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, growyourshow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show. We are back, and I wanted to find out, with all of this service that they're doing, how much are they charging? How much is it going to cost you?
So it's on an average about $200 per episode.
Okay. So is there an upfront payment? Is there, what all are you paying for?
Just that, and $200 per episode, and as essentially 4 episodes in a month. But in the initial period, I just have so many episodes coming out. I am launching with, I think, 5 episodes on day 1. In the month, we'll go twice a week, but then once a week after that.
So like on day 1, it's $1,000, and then it's $800 a month, slightly over. Okay, cool. Yeah. They're going to handle everything. They email your guest for you and send them like the promo images and stuff like that.
Yes. So they will have those, the promo images, the small snippet, and they will send it, take care of the emails too.
Nice. I like that. All right. And You said you had a membership area and that you wanted your listener to go to the membership area. Tell us about how that works.
So the membership area is not created yet, but by the time this podcast is launched, it will be there. So it will be on our website. You just will see as a membership drop down, and you can go there, and it's going to be free. It's not going to be a charge. So it's just those visuals in terms of presentation of these episodes is going to be available on the membership area. And I'm doing that on the Go High Level platform, so that create the membership.
Okay. Got it. What's the hardest part of doing all of this so far? Is there anything that you're hung up on, worried about? What's kind of been the hardest part?
So I think stepping back and thinking about what this podcast is, and like I said, I want to approach it with the go-giver way, right? I want to literally reach massive amount of people and add this massive amount of value to them through each episode step by step. So my first question and my first goal is to just be able to reach this massive amount of people, like millions of people, for example. And the goal is to get to the top, number one podcast in different categories. And so that question I want to get answered. That's my burning question I want to get answered, that how do we get to that part? I mean, I know there is no guarantees about everything, but that's when there is the visibility, right? I mean, how many podcasts do you see that are in real estate world that are talking about other than multifamily and focusing on not just the passive income, but this holistic approach? How many podcasts are you looking at which are started with a first generation immigrant? And beyond that, how many are started with a woman, being the first generation immigrant? So that I want to be that flag bearer and kind of inspiration to other podcast providers like me, or who have not even started doing a podcast, that we can do this. So I want to be that in, top one ranking in multiple categories. So that's my burning question.
Yeah. So I will take it back to a couple of friends who launched podcasts. One is Whitney Sewell, and he's just fantastic. I really like this guy.
Yeah.
Whitney is a go-giver, like you were talking about before. He's definitely outward focused, helping other people. And I've been really impressed with him. So before he launched a podcast, I had a podcast, and it was ranking top 1% in the world for all podcasts. And he came and asked some questions. He asked Joe Fairless, he asked Trevor McGregor, he asked lots of other people. And we all kind of gave him our best advice that we could think of. And Whitney went ahead and launched a podcast. One of the things that he did was he had 7 episodes a week. One of the things that he did is he really focused on marketing, organic marketing. And the third thing that he did is he partnered with other people. He partnered with other people in like, hey, can you shout me out? He partnered with other people like, hey, come on my podcast and let me feature you. And because he's having 7 conversations a week, instead of 1 conversation a week, he has so many more people that are able to get into his corner and feel like that he added value to them. So to really be the biggest go-giver and get the most amount of value reciprocated from the efforts, you want to put out more content. You want to put out as much content as possible. You also want to partner with other people. You want to ask people to help in the beginning, ask your coach, ask your mentor, ask your friends, your family, other investors that you see that would resonate with it. Just say, I want you to listen to an episode or 2 of the podcast and give an honest rating and written review.
Right.
And if you say, this is important, if you say, I want you to listen to an episode or 2 of the podcast and give an honest rating and review, it goes differently than if you just say, give me a 5-star review. Can I get a 5-star review from you? When you're asking for a 5-star review, the person is less likely to even review you because they don't know if they can give 5, and they don't want it to be your choice that they're giving 5. Even if they believed it needed to be 5, then it's hard for them because they're like, I haven't even listened. She's asking for a 5. She's being selfish. That's just what they'll think. But when you say, listen to an episode or 2 and just give me an honest review of whatever you think of the podcast, then what's going to happen is the review that they'll do is they're more likely to review it. And they're probably going to give you 5 stars anyway. And additionally, you're going to get credit for downloads and listens, which will trigger some algorithms. When you get ratings and reviews from your friends, your family, and they don't listen to the podcast, those ratings and reviews oftentimes get taken down. They get deleted. They have a low weight. They'll never show up because the podcast companies want to make sure that they're authentic. And how else can you get it authentic unless they're downloading, listening, and talking about what they learned?
Right.
in the review itself. So that's another thing when you're asking for help. And then what was the third thing that I mentioned? Did you write it on notes already, Matthew?
Yeah, I was just talking about partnering, marketing. I think
Marketing. So another thing you can do is paid advertising. So
right.
it sounds like that's one thing that your company doesn't do is just paid advertising. And so if I were you, I'd probably find a company or a person or do it yourself. Who, not how, you probably will find somebody.
Yeah.
I can already guess. But what they do is they increase the amount of eyeballs or earballs that come
Right.
to your podcast, where they do, for example, Facebook ads, YouTube ads, LinkedIn ads, email campaigns, banner ads, private message campaigns, trying to get the perfect avatar, your listener, the person that's a passive investor that you want to add value to actually know about your podcast. If you're putting money behind it, I think of it like this. I want to be the number one podcast, so I need to add fuel to the tank to get
Right.
there. That's paid ads. I want to go 9,000 miles from one part of the world to another part of the world, like you did. You can't do it without fuel in the tank. So if it's an airplane, they got to put fuel in that airplane. If it is a boat, they either have to have fuel in the bodies and row really, really hard,
Right.
or they have to have coal, or they have to have steam, or they have to have whatever type of engine, gasoline, diesel, whatever kind of engine they have. There has to be that fuel, or else you'll only know where you're going, but you'll be stuck in the water.
Right.
You don't want to just know where you're going and not get there. So you have to add fuel to the tank. It's essential. And a lot of podcasters neglect it. A lot of podcasters, they say, once my show starts making money, then I'll put money in. And their show never makes money because they never put money in. And so nobody ever sees it. They don't have any listeners. They don't have any traction. And then they're stressed and they're like, come on. And they're doing this for 2, 3, 4 years. And they either quit the podcast, which is a lot of people that I know. They quit the podcast or 2, 3, 4 years of effort and it never did anything for them. Well, it's because they never invested in the podcast. You're an investor. You think of investing. You put out a certain amount of money to the ATM and you get a mid-20s return, you said.
Right.
And you can't just be like, all right, I'm going to stand by this ATM, somebody else's ATM, and just wait for me to make money. Once I start making money, then I can invest in ATMs. It's not going to work that way. You have to first take the leap of faith, invest in the podcast, invest in the gasoline, invest in the ATM so that you can get that return and show up to the place that you want to be 9,000 miles away or 500 miles away. You have to have fuel to the tank. So I'll share those one more time. Here's a few ideas. Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, podcast ads on other people's podcasts. You can do like Buzzsprout ads. You can do so many different options. Email campaigns, private message campaigns, which is shared a lot on our podcast, where you individually message people and start a relationship with them and eventually tell them about the podcast. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. So all sorts of paid advertising that you can be involved in. Here's a couple of considerations that are important. When you are advertising, getting in front of people, are you getting in front of the right person? That's a main consideration. So understanding the avatar or the listener better helps you to be able to find people like that. So you can go to like, when you're doing Facebook ads, you can narrow it down to that person. When you're going to Facebook groups to do a private message or meetup groups to connect with people, or for example, LinkedIn, you want to narrow the search so that you're really getting that person. So if they're in IT, if they are Indian, if they are anything, just whatever you want. And you figure it out, you narrow it down and you find groups that are about that person. And you can find meetup groups, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups. You can find groups that are very, very niche, and you can be surprised at how many there are. Like, it's just insane. Every type of person, Hispanics that voted for Trump or whatever, you can really narrow it down to whatever you want, and you find that person, perfect avatar. And then you just think about getting in front of them on a regular basis with the right message. So think about what is compelling. What are they going to click on? What
Right.
are they going to do? And the last thing that I'll say is when you're thinking about getting in front of the right person, you're split testing everything, or you're A/B testing everything. So when you're doing paid ads, when you're getting in front of people this way, and you're trying to get in front of the right person, and you are trying to hone in the message that is going to work for them, you might have 3 or 4 or 10 or 12 or 16 separate different ads that all run at a small amount of money each day. And then you start to what they call kill the ones that are not working. Or I guess what I think of it like a tree. You want to grow the fruit on the tree, you have to prune the tree. So you cut back the stuff that you don't want or that is taking up energy from the tree so that it can focus the energy into the right place. Like when they're making wine at vineyards, they cut back a lot of the fruit that they don't think is going to work or is too high or is in the sun or out of the sun. It just depends on where it is. And they'll cut back some leaves to allow more sun. They'll do all sorts of different things to bring the best to that fruit that they're focusing on. And that's the A/B testing. It's like you got 16 different ads going on Facebook, for example, and 4 of them are doing nothing and 4 of them are amazing. Well, you take all the money from those 4 and you add it to the other 4. And then you start to make a lot of money. You start to get traction. Another thing that I would do, so you're asking for ratings, reviews, you're asking for honest reviews. You're asking for people to listen. Here is an algorithm, and this is what we'll end with. Here's an algorithm that you want to try to follow. You want people to come to the podcast and subscribe or follow the show. The second thing out of 5, that's the first. Second thing is you want that person to start downloading episodes, whatever you can do to have them actually download. The third thing that's very, very important, because a lot of people pay for fake downloads and it works against them and they wonder why. Hey, I'm getting all these downloads. I'm so cool. But why does nobody else see my podcast? Well, it's because there's nobody listening. And it's also because the people that are downloading or the robots that are downloading are not subscribed to the show. They're just in there and downloading different episodes. So you want to make sure that they are subscribed or following. You want to make sure that they're downloading. That is important as long as you have the other things. The third is that they are listening through. They're playing the episodes. They're actually pushing play, not just downloading it and doing nothing with it. The fourth thing is that they give an honest rating review. And the fifth thing is that they keep coming back. So I think you can think of a lot of ways to try to get somebody to make sure that they're doing all of those. And with this takeaway, after they've already listened, rated, and reviewed, you can always go back to them and say, hey, did you hear that last episode? I think you would get value from it. Or, hey, I think that last episode is one that you should share with a friend, or whatever it is, so that they keep coming back to the podcast, which triggers the last part of the algorithm, which allows you to be ranked, because that's your goal, top 1 in many categories.
I love that. Yeah, I do have questions. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. I love for your perspective. True Go Giver as well. I love that. A couple of questions, in terms of creating this budget, right? What is the budget that I should look for in terms of advertising? Now, advertising goes against my kind of the root and the soul that I'm putting in there, right? But I understand that it's about my voice being reached to many people. And that's what my intention is, that I want people to hear it, right? Why do I want to get to number 1? It's not because I want to be that top 1 podcast, but because that's when more and more people will start getting value from it and listening to it, and I'll get in front of them. So that's the purpose, right? So I understand that I have to put in. So what kind of budget are we looking at? And my second question is, initially at least, is there any like giveaway or something that we can plan now? Very interestingly, that Go Giver is like my Bible. My first case on the podcast show was Bob Burg, the co-author of Go Giver.
Awesome.
So I'm actually giving 10 copies of Go Giver, signed copies by him as a giveaway. So do you have any other recommendations in terms of organically first and like the budgeting wise, and how long should I be doing this advertising?
I would say that the length of advertising you should just focus on doing a year or 2. So actually, interestingly enough, my team, we do paid ads for clients, and we have 2 different lengths of contracts, and it's 1 year and 2 year. Because if with the longevity, you're more likely to keep listeners, you're more likely to stay in front of them and trigger those 5 things where they subscribe, they download, they listen, they rate and review, and they keep coming back. If we're staying in front of them for a year or 2, then you're more likely to trigger those algorithms. So that's my recommendation, is a year or two. The monthly budget, it would be wherever you can. A lot of companies, they say, we're going to put out X amount of budget after the company, we're not necessarily talking about a podcast, but after the company has been around for a couple of years, what they try to do is it's like 20% of gross revenue, for example, is one idea that a lot of people do for marketing. So I'm going to make, let's just say, $1 million a year. I want to at least put in 200,000 in paid ads. So that would be somewhere close to 18-ish grand a month, something like that. I'm not typing it out, but give or take, it's a little less than 20,000 a month. And that would be a decent budget. But when we're thinking of these things, we need to think also of startups, because your podcast is brand new and you don't have the revenue yet to do 20%, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't put anything in. If you want to have a successful business, you have to spend money to make money. In the beginning, you have to start putting it out so that you can get it back. And so my suggestion would be, and whatever you can do for at least a 12-month period, if that to you is 1,000, awesome, do 1,000 a month. If that to you is 100 a month, do that. If that to you is 3,000, 4,000, 6,000, 10,000, 20,000, 80,000 a month, then you do that. And then you just keep pouring into it and you will get all of that back. It just feels a little bit risky. It feels like you're jumping off of you're taking a leap of faith, if you will.
Right.
So I would recommend just whatever you can do for a sustainable at least a year. And for my company, when we do paid ads for people, we have a couple of packages. One of them is a little over 2,000 a month, and the other one's a little over 4,000 a month. Mm-hmm. And so those are the 1 year and 2 year contracts that people can do. And what they do is we promise to get you in for the lower one, ranking in the top 10% in the world, or we give you a big check. And we do it for the higher one, ranking in the top 1% in the world, or we give you a big check. So I wouldn't call it a guarantee. At least my attorney doesn't want it to be called a guarantee, but we do actually write you a check, a big check, if it doesn't happen within that year. So that helps there be less risk for a client, because they know that, hey, if this doesn't work out, I still get all the value of the marketing. I might not be top 1%, but I'll be top 2%. And I would have never been there if I didn't put fuel in the tank.
True.
So I would say just as high as you can for a year. And I would put it to the things that I mentioned in doing it the way that we already talked about. Does that help?
Yeah, that definitely helps. And I think that's a great perspective in terms of just doing that consistently. It's not just, poof and go. It's just that consistently.
Yeah.
My problem is that, the budget, because like you are saying, I'm a startup, already in the negatives in terms of what I'm spending right now. And to be consistently spending that much money. And I don't want to think about, a lot of people do the paid advertisements and monetization of the podcast, but I don't want to think about it that way yet, but what is your perspective on that? I just don't feel that's very organic to kind of have ads in between.
You mean ads on the show?
Yes.
Got it. Yeah. So I think you always have to have a call to action that will help your listener. I am hearing that you say it's not organic to offer things. My perspective is, if the thing that you're offering is good for them, then you should. I don't bring in outside sponsors because I don't really care to. And my podcast makes a lot of money without that. But my podcast makes good money because I have calls to action. I ask people to do a certain thing. So I will say, if you're ready for help on a podcast, reach out to me. We can have a free conversation. I can ask you some questions. You can ask me some questions, and we'll see if it's right to work together. Mm-hmm. And then they might. I also have other ads that are just like a lead magnet. So it's like, hey, download this thing that'll benefit you if you would like it. And this is where you can go.
Yeah.
So I think it's really good to have a sponsor break. But for me, I always am the sponsor. And I have a few clients that are really, really, really happy with their sponsors, who they might be making $2,500 to a little over $10,000 a month with, one sponsor, sometimes two different sponsors, where like maybe two of them are paying $6,000 each or something. And they love it because they already want that person to go there. So for example, if infinite banking, So if you do it yourself, then, and you know that it's valuable, then you can say, hey, if you think that you could use infinite banking or infinity banking, however you want to say it, if you think you could use that, schedule a call with me. We'll get on a call and I will consult with you, or schedule a call with this team and they will consult with you. Or if you want to be a passive investor, if you want to start making more money and generating money while you sleep and being able to get into a better financial freedom so you can do anything you want, then schedule a call with me and I'll have an interview with you to see if you're a fit for what we're doing. These are some examples. And then what will happen is if you're also advertising for like growing your podcast and you're giving these calls to action, I mean, you might be making $60,000 a month. You might be making any amount of money that it can work out for you based on who is working with you or what you're offering or what you do and what the commissions that you take. But for example, if we get you to the top 1 or top 1%, and you don't want a sponsor for your show, you just, for any reason, you're just like, I can't think of anybody who would add value to my audience except for me. I believe that you get top 1% and easily you'd be making $30,000 a month or something like that. If you're just doing, for example, acquisition fees. You're getting in front of that many people now. And all you're doing is taking an acquisition fee, which to the listener on a lot of syndications, maybe not all, the person who puts the deal together, they put a lot of effort and work into finding the deal, raising the money. And so to keep the lights on, they will actually take a fee. Sometimes 1%, sometimes 3% or whatever. Who knows? Who cares? But if it's like a $10 million asset and it's 3%, that's $300,000. And if you're closing on one of those a month, for example, because you're in top 1%, then that's looking like it's almost $4 million a year that you're making because you grew the podcast. So I definitely would focus on that gas to the tank to make sure you're getting where you want. And I think we can wrap it up. I appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah,
we're gonna link to the podcast. We're gonna link to your bio. Your company is all in the show notes, so the listener can just click on that. And to you, the listener, remember that every other episode is a solo episode where I'm just going to be pouring into you, and I've got something queued up for you. So I'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much, Adam.
If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of 3 things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.